On a school day like any other, Haruka, true to his routine, remains isolated at his desk, the typical loner. He is well aware of his status, and in some ways, he even appreciates the silence that accompanies him. To him, it's far preferable to any interaction with his classmates, for whom he harbors overwhelming disdain. The classroom is divided into groups: the delinquents, the popular girls, the gym brothers, and, of course, the rest of the forgotten. Haruka, however, fits into none of these circles, and this exclusion suits him perfectly. The time he gains by being alone allows him to dive into his books, a peaceful escape from the uninteresting reality around him. But, as tranquility rarely lasts, his moment of introspection is abruptly interrupted by a bright light that appears beneath his feet. With a flash of recognition, he realizes that a summoning circle is forming. For a brief moment, his heart races. An Ice Sky adventure? Perhaps, after all, he is destined for something grand. However, excitement quickly gives way to suspicion. For a loner, he's receiving far too much attention. And if he's learned anything about Ice Skies, it's that things rarely end well for those who suddenly stand out without reason. A sense of panic begins to creep into his chest. Determined not to become yet another victim of this uncertain fate, especially before GTA 6 is released, Haruka acts quickly. With the portal still forming, he bolts toward the classroom door. However, his hopes are dashed when he finds the door sealed with magic. He pushes, pulls, punches, but nothing happens. The portal completes. His classmates start to disappear one by one, their bodies fading into thin air. Time is running out. In a last-ditch effort, Haruka tries a bold move. He climbs into the ceiling's ventilation ducts, hoping the summoning circle will lose sight of him. But just when he thinks he's escaped, the light pursues him, piercing through walls and ceilings. The inevitable happens. Haruka is pulled into another world. The sensation of failure and helplessness overwhelms him, and the bitter taste of defeat settles in. When Haruka opens his eyes, he expects to see an Ice Sky cliché, maybe a pompous king or a dazzling princess, begging for his help to save the kingdom. Instead, what he finds is a bald old man, pacing back and forth, agitated and visibly panicked. God, apparently. The nervous old man explains that he's already sent all of Haruka's classmates to the other world, but Haruka's escape attempt complicated everything, making his summoning a mistake. Now desperate, God needs to send him to the alternate world quickly before anyone discovers the fiasco. Haruka, who had thus far maintained a cynical air of resignation, begins to feel his patience wearing thin when God offers him abilities to help in this new world. But all the good abilities have already been chosen. What's left? Scraps. Skills so ridiculous they border on insulting: villager skills from Minecraft, gambling dice, magical contact lenses, and, to top it all off, a stick. And, as if the humiliation weren't enough, he's only allowed to pick a limited number of these mediocre abilities. Haruka's blood boils. He explodes, reprimanding the old god for putting him in such an absurd situation. However, God isn't about to tolerate the insolence of a mortal. He knows he messed up, but that doesn't mean he's going to let a cheeky teenager insult him. With a bored expression, he tells Haruka that, as compensation, he'll receive all the discarded skills. Without wanting to drag the conversation on any longer, he teleports Haruka to the other world instantly. Haruka crashes into reality with a thud. Sure, he has more skills than usual, but what good are they when he's been dropped directly into a dense, unfamiliar forest? He's never lived in the wild, and the lack of supplies makes him feel the creeping cold of vulnerability. However, as he scans the ground, he finds a bag, part of his villager skill. The bag allows him to store an infinite number of items. Inside, there are a few basic pieces of equipment. A small relief amid the desolation. After equipping himself, Haruka decides to check his stats. With the gambling dice in hand, he must roll them to determine his status points. The sense of uncertainty tightens in his stomach, but he has no choice. The dice roll on the ground, and he receives an M score. What does M mean? Unsure, he decides to allocate all the points to his luck stat. When he opens his status window, he sees that his luck is completely maxed out. A victory? Maybe. But instead of celebrating, Haruka sighs, lamenting not using the points on something more useful. As he explores his skills, he discovers that, aside from the useless ones, he gained 2 unique ones. Due to being such a loner on Earth, he will be unable to form parties in this new world, even if he wanted to. In exchange, his other skill allows him to force monsters to serve him, since, after all, he wouldn't be able to make friends. The bitter irony of this does not escape Haruka. The idea of never being able to form the dream Ice Guy protagonist harem frustrates him, but he has no time for trivial regrets. Though he feels tempted to search for his classmates, or at least for the logic of where their starting point should be, Haruka quickly dismisses the idea. He never cared about them before, and he certainly won't start now. His priority is survival. He needs supplies, but the forest around him is dense, dark, and filled with unseen dangers. The tension rises. He can barely see through the trees, and with each step, the possibility of encountering a lurking monster becomes more real. However, something clicks in his mind: the contact lenses. When he puts them on, the world around him transforms. Suddenly, he can see details that were previously hidden, with the ability to assess his surroundings. Thanks to this newfound vision, he navigates the forest, finding safe mushrooms to eat and storing them in his villager bag. After quenching his thirst at a nearby river, something catches his attention. Between the shadows of the trees, a small cave reveals itself. Haruka, always cautious, mutters a silent prayer, fearing he'll find some monster lurking inside. However, upon exploring the interior, he realizes the cave is empty. The place is spacious and, to him, perfect for becoming his temporary base. With a relieved sigh, Haruka sets up his tent and lights a magic lantern, filling the cave with a soft, comforting glow. He then uses his temperature control magic to light a campfire, keeping himself warm. To his surprise, the simple use of his magic unlocks a new fire skill. Additionally, his constant vigilance against monsters grants him various detection skills. Though Haruka has acquired a handful of skills, his only attack technique remains a mere stick. He still needs to figure out how to protect himself effectively. The next morning, he awakens with a start, his heart racing as if sensing imminent danger. Stepping outside the tent, the tension in his shoulders eases as he realizes no monster attacked him during the night. He's safe, but thanks, ironically, to the skill items he had so thoroughly despised. However, escaping monsters doesn't mean escaping his other relentless adversary, hunger. Without hesitation, he pulls out a frying pan and starts frying some of the mushrooms he had gathered the day before. And, if you're wondering, yes, the frying pan was stored in his villager's bag, along with a complete set of kitchen knives and a portion of dried meat. So far, this bag has been his greatest asset, something Haruka can't help but question: what kind of villager prepared this stock so well? Fed, he knows he needs to decide what to do next. Haruka leaves the cave, his steps slow, reflecting on his next moves. The cave, while a temporary shelter, isn't enough. He needs a constant food source and, more urgently, effective measures to protect himself from the monsters inhabiting this unfamiliar land. Fortunately, with his magical contact lenses, finding food becomes relatively easy. Right away, he spots more mushrooms and some herbs. But the problem of the monsters continues to haunt his thoughts. Suddenly, a cold sensation runs down his spine as his detection skill kicks in. Something is approaching. Determined but cautious, he follows the sound until he discovers the source: goblins. Not one, but 2, and both stronger than him. Haruka feels panic rising. He thinks about running, but the harsh truth is that if he wants to survive in this forest, he'll eventually have to face them. This is a reality that can't be avoided. He takes a deep breath, determined to strike while he still has the element of surprise. Despite his doubts about the effectiveness of his staff, Haruka enchants it with magic, hoping it will work. To his surprise, the result is far better than expected. With a swift motion, he leaps out of the bushes and strikes one of the goblins directly on the head. The powerful, precise blow stuns the monster, and Haruka takes advantage of the moment to continue the attack. Each hit is fierce, relentless, until the goblin succumbs. One down. But the other is coming. The second goblin charges, but now Haruka is in sync with the rhythm of the battle. The monster's movements are slow, predictable. He dodges easily and, with a mix of magic and brute force, takes down the opponent. His heart still races as he looks at the goblins' bodies, his first real victory in this world. Exhausted, he decides he's done enough for the day and returns to the safety of his cave. Back in his improvised shelter, Haruka prepares a modest dinner with the mushrooms he collected. While eating, he examines the club he took from the goblin. Though it's a powerful weapon, it's heavy and has a short reach, something that doesn't suit his combat style. He decides to stick with his trusty staff for now. Checking his stats, Haruka notices something unexpected. He's leveled up. Not only that, but all his stats have doubled. The sense of progress excites him, but the reality of his situation quickly brings him back down to earth. The next morning, the routine repeats. More mushrooms, more boredom. The craving for meat intensifies, almost becoming an obsession. However, to hunt, he needs to improve, and the first skill he plans to test is magic fusion, a newly acquired technique that envelopes his body in a layer of magic, boosting his physical and magical defenses and raising his strength to impressive levels. Haruka also decides to test his appraisal skill, now at level 2. However, when using the technique, he only finds a question mark next to the descriptions. He ponders for a moment about what it could mean, but soon gives up, frustrated. There's no time to waste on riddles. Out there, there's a forest to explore, monsters to defeat. As he steps out for his magic training, he finds yet another mushroom on the ground. A tired sigh escapes his lips. His hunger-crazed mind almost makes him believe that meat should grow on the trees in this bizarre world. With the mana infusion active, Haruka takes a step forward, but with the magical boost, he ends up launching several meters ahead, surprised by his own body's lightness. Each movement now feels precise, almost supernatural. He glides through the forest with ease, testing his newfound strength. With his confidence renewed, Haruka challenges 2 more goblins, defeating one with a single blow. The power flowing through his body is intoxicating. He thinks he can defeat more, maybe even a larger group. However, upon spotting 3 goblins together, his courage wavers. With common sense, he decides to retreat before biting off more than he can chew. Back in the cave, he continues with his routine. During the day, combat. At night, magical experiments. One of those nights, he discovers that he can shape coffee tables with his abilities. Eventually, he creates a magical gate for his cave, increasing the security of his shelter. With that, he finally feels ready to venture out at night, to hunt and, at last, satisfy his craving for meat. When he finally tracks down a rabbit, ready to savor his first meat meal in days, something in the distance catches his attention. His first thought is that more goblins are approaching, but upon closer observation, he realizes that fate has brought him something far more troublesome, his former classmates. The delinquents, the popular girls, the gym brothers, and even the nerds are there, scattered throughout the forest. Haruka hesitates. He hated being around them, but seeing them there, the sense of isolation becomes more real. He ponders for a brief moment, especially upon spotting the class representative, who had always been kind to him. Could he step out of his refuge and offer a simple hello? But soon, reason prevails. He has finally achieved the solitude he always longed for. A world without small talk, without the presence of people who annoyed him, without the pressure of social interactions. No, he won't ruin that. Resolved, Haruka chooses to ignore his classmates, opting for the path of solitude. He will conquer this world alone, with no one to interfere with his destiny. Haruka hid in the bushes, trying to stay invisible as the delinquents approached. One of them was convinced he had heard something coming from that direction, so he went to check. To Haruka's relief, all he found was a rabbit, and soon the group moved on. Feeling temporarily safe, Haruka decided to follow the delinquents, curious to see if they were up to something. He listened carefully, hoping to catch some useful information, but was soon disappointed. All the delinquents were having was a deep discussion about the class vice representative's chest. With no authority to stop them, Haruka was slightly worried about what the delinquents might do to the girls, but he was confident the class representative would handle things as she always did. However, things took a turn when he overheard them talking about using a connection with Tanaka, due to his abilities, to get whatever they wanted. Haruka realized they were planning something more serious. But intervening would mean talking to them, and he was firmly against any kind of social interaction. Back at his cave, he started grilling some mushrooms, but then it hit him: his loner skill had just leveled up. It was as if even his status screen acknowledged his isolation. It was probably because he avoided his classmates, but on second thought, it wasn't that bad. In fact, Haruka wanted to level up even more since his overall level was still stuck at 3. The problem was, 2 of his skills, Jack of all trades and useless skills, just wouldn't evolve. He didn't even know what those skills meant. Jack of all trades seemed simple enough, being competent in many areas but never mastering any specific craft. But useless skills intrigued him more. The best explanation Haruka could come up with involved puppetry, but that didn't make much sense to him. He decided to let the matter rest for now, focusing on his meal, though he still longed for a good piece of meat. Afterward, he called it a day and went to sleep. But fate wouldn't let him rest. In the middle of the night, a noise outside disturbed him. Reluctantly, he got up to investigate, expecting to find the delinquents causing trouble again. But what he saw was different. This time, it was the nerds. They were fighting a group of goblins and were clearly struggling. Haruka thought about helping them, but when he checked their stats, he saw that all of them were level 16, while he was barely at level 3. They would be fine without him. Still, before leaving, he noticed 2 goblins sneaking up behind them. The nerds were in trouble, and the memory of when they shared their holographic Charizard with him tugged at his heart. He decided they were worth saving. With a stick in hand, he stepped out of hiding and took down the 2 goblins with a single, precise hit. The nerds were surprised to see him, but quickly thanked him for the help. Haruka, however, found it hard to communicate. After all, it had been so long since he'd spoken to anyone. Even so, he led them back to his cave. The nerds were impressed by the interior, especially considering it was just a cave. Haruka awkwardly explained that he had learned some earth magic and crafting skills to fix the place up, but the nerds found it amazing that he had done it all by himself. While preparing a drink for the group, he asked why they were in the forest so late. The mood shifted, and after a brief pause, the nerds confessed they were fleeing from the rest of their classmates. After the class was transported to that world, chaos quickly set in. Strange skills were chosen, like mind control spells and the puppeteer ability, which the nerds had learned one of the delinquents possessed. The nerds were desperate to level up and protect themselves, especially after hearing the delinquents' plans to turn the girls into their puppets. They tried to warn the class representative, but soon the delinquents had leveled up enough to use their skills, with the vice representative as their main target. However, thanks to a surprise attack by the nerds, the delinquents were defeated, their abilities sealed, and they were expelled from the camp. That seemed like the end of the story, but the delinquents, spiteful as ever, attacked the camp while the nerds were away, burning everything down. When the nerds returned, they found only ashes, and to make things worse, the popular girls blamed them for the disaster. Fortunately, the class representative stepped in, reminding everyone that the nerds were the real reason the group had survived so far. The nerds appreciated the support from the class representative, but their patience with the camp had run out. Tired of their ungrateful peers, they decided to flee. After hearing the whole story, Haruka felt genuinely sorry for them and decided to do something special. He hosted a mushroom feast for that night. It was the first time in a long while that he truly enjoyed the company of others. But the next day, the nerds had to leave, ready to follow the river in search of a village and start their lives as adventurers. Before they left, they invited Haruka to join them, calling him a friend. He was touched but declined, believing his mediocre skills would only hold them back. Still, one concern nagged at him: the class camp, where the representative still was. She was the only person besides the nerds he actually liked. Determined to check on the situation, Haruka set off toward the camp. Along the way, he was attacked by a kobold, which bit him hard. Despite being wounded, he killed the creature and continued on. By nightfall, he arrived at the riverbank where the camp should have been, but it was empty. No sign of anyone. He assumed they had moved and used one of his detection skills to follow footprints until he found the popular girls. Of all people, the popular girls were the last ones Haruka wanted to see. He even tried heading back to his cave, but when he heard a desperate please, he stopped immediately. Please wasn't part of their vocabulary. Something serious must have happened. Reluctantly, Haruka approached them. The first thing they asked was if he knew where the nerds were. He hesitated, thinking they just wanted to complain about them again. However, the girls actually wanted to apologize. They now understood how much the nerds had done for them and felt sorry for having been so ungrateful. But the nerds had already left, and the girls, with no survival skills, were lost. Desperate, they begged Haruka to teach them how to survive in the forest. He was so surprised by the request that, without much thought, he agreed. As a result, his subjugation skill was activated, turning the girls into his obedient followers. From that moment on, they followed him wherever he went, defeating monsters and bringing him magic crystals like puppies waiting for approval. Haruka, however, wasn't pleased with how things had turned out. He preferred his solitude, and now the girls were relying on him for everything. When he noticed that one of them had a small injury on her arm, he handed her a healing potion he had prepared. But instead of using it on herself, she applied it to him. Annoyed by their exaggerated devotion, Haruka began to wonder how he would explain all of this to the class representative. As if by fate, she appeared at that moment, walking through the forest. As soon as the class representative catches Haruka's attention, he freezes. He has no idea what to say to her, and to make matters worse, he doesn't even know her name, despite all the years they've spent in the same class, ever since elementary school. She has always been kind to him, so when she realizes that he never bothered to learn her name, it's hard for her to believe. A few minutes later, the rest of the girls from the class arrive, practically all of them, except for the popular ones who were following the representative's orders. Speaking of which, the representative notices that the popular girls are standing behind Haruka, looking a little lost, and her first assumption is that he must have done something to them. He would like to say he did nothing, but the truth is that, even unintentionally, his ability ended up turning the girls into his servants, and he doesn't know what to do to fix it. Haruka tries to explain the situation as innocently as possible, but none of them seem to believe him. Exhausted, he turns to leave, but the representative stops him, insisting that he stays while she checks on Shimazaki. Fortunately, a small shake is enough to break the enchantment, and Shimazaki assures everyone that everything is fine. With that, Haruka thinks he can finally go, but the representative still wants to know how this whole subjugation thing happened, and she's not ready to let him off the hook so easily. As they argue, Haruka steps away and leans against a tree. With nothing better to do, he decides to practice his expansion magic for when he gets back home. He tries to create a basement, but he makes a mistake and ends up buried in the ground up to his neck. He remains trapped there, helpless, until the representative finds him, perplexed to see him in such a state after only asking him to wait for a few minutes. Boredom makes you do some crazy things, he thinks as she pulls him back to the surface. Finally free, she apologizes for not trusting him, especially now that Shimazaki clarified that he was only trying to help. Haruka doesn't recall promising to help anyone, but seeing that all the girls are thanking him, he decides to just accept the praise. With everything settled, he wants to head back home, but the girls aren't thrilled at the idea of being left alone in the forest. The representative hears Haruka mention that he has a house and asks about it. He explains that, with some free time, he managed to build a place to live. The girls are impressed. He managed to build an entire house, while they struggle to maintain a simple campsite. So, they call for an impromptu meeting. The representative asks how many people Haruka's house can accommodate, and he estimates that with a few adjustments, it could house around 200 people, maybe more if they remove some furniture and empty out the indoor pool. The representative feels a bit envious of how well Haruka is handling things, and though she doesn't like to impose, she asks if she and the other girls can stay the night, since they are all homeless at the moment. Haruka panics. Having a bunch of guy friends around is one thing, but a whole class of girls? After regaining his composure, he agrees and starts guiding them to his house. After so much time wandering in the forest, he navigates it with ease, helped by an ability that aids him in finding his way. Finally, when they arrive, the girls are amazed by Haruka's house. It's been so long since they had a roof over their heads, or even access to a proper bathroom, that as soon as he mentions where the bath is, they rush over, stripping without hesitation. There's no way Haruka can sleep in the same room as all of them, so he sets up a tent outside and prepares to spend the night there. As he tries to relax, the representative enters the tent to talk. She thanks him for all his help, confessing that ever since the nerds left and the Jim brothers decided to take off, things had been tough for them. But now, after a bath and a decent meal, the mood is much better. Still, the representative admits to feeling like a failure for not being able to protect the class on her own. Haruka thinks she's being too hard on herself. Considering that the nerds practically spent their whole lives preparing for this kind of situation, she shouldn't compare herself to them. This was the first time she'd even heard of Ice Guy, after all, so all things considered, she's doing quite well. Hearing this, the representative feels relieved, though Haruka's accomplishments, like building a house in a week, still seem hard to match. She wishes him a good night and heads back inside, but Haruka knows that after everything that happened today, falling asleep will be nearly impossible. The next morning, Haruka wakes up to one of the girls sitting outside his tent, asking him to get up because breakfast is ready. It takes him a moment to understand what's happening, but when he does, he protests that he still wants to sleep a little more. The girl doesn't accept that, jumping on top of him to force him out of bed. Defeated, he asks what's for breakfast. He was expecting the usual mushroom soup, but to his surprise, it's fish. He gets so excited that he accidentally headbutts the girl. She gets slightly hurt, but Haruka hardly notices, so happy is he to finally have something different to eat. The representative finds it funny that he's so excited about fish, considering he lives near the river. Haruka explains that despite that, he's terrible at fishing and has never caught any. Impressed by how efficiently the girls manage to catch fish, he asks to see their method, and the representative agrees, taking him to the river. One of the girls uses a lightning magic ability to electrocute the water, and several fish float up, ready to be collected. Haruka is impressed and asks her to repeat the trick. She hesitates but eventually gives in. This time, he uses his packaging ability to seal the lightning's energy, acquiring the magic for himself. Intrigued, the representative asks what Haruka did, and he explains that his packaging ability, combined with other skills, allows him to absorb magic. It could be useful, but he doesn't think it's that impressive since most of his abilities seem kind of pointless. While some girls play in the river, Haruka takes the opportunity to ask the representative about their plans. She says they intend to go to the nearest village and find the nerds, but they need to level up to face the dangers outside the forest. Haruka offers to train them before they head out, and they accept. Shortly after, the group is gathered in the forest. Haruka asks the girls to share their levels, and all of them are above level 15, which makes him feel a bit down for still being at level 7. To start the training, he challenges them to face a group of kobolds. The girls think it will be easy, since the kobolds are level 6, but moments later, all of them are on the ground, defeated. The girls manage to settle in, as Haruka's tent has the ability to expand. Even so, he still has no idea why they decided to gather there. After a brief debate, they return to the fight, confident that this time they will be victorious. Haruka is pleased to see the group's renewed motivation, but, to be honest, he doubts they will succeed. Before the girls set out, the same one who brought breakfast the day before approaches Haruka, wanting to apologize for her behavior. She admits that initially, she only got close to him to test if he would try to take advantage of the situation. At first, she didn't trust him, but after he offered shelter, food, and training, she began to believe that maybe he was trustworthy. Now, she promises to be there again the next morning, with breakfast ready. Haruka is happy with the change in her attitude and, since he doesn't know her name, he nicknames her Fish Girl. The next morning, Haruka is pleased to receive the fish brought by the Fish Girl. However, the calm doesn't last long, as he soon hears the other girls excitedly talking about facing the kobolds again, seeking revenge. Before they can rush off, the representative calls them back, stating that they need more training. Without it, defeat is certain. She suggests they start by practicing with goblins, but the battle against these creatures doesn't go as planned. Despite the defeat, some still believe they're ready to take on the kobolds, while others pretend to be sick to avoid more combat. Haruka has a bad feeling about this insistence, but is prepared to intervene if necessary. However, to his surprise, the girls show that they have learned from their mistakes in the fight against the goblins, joining forces to finally defeat the kobolds. The representative congratulates them on the victory, and Haruka feels relieved to see that they are starting to manage on their own. Perhaps, at last, he can return to his solitary life. But then, the representative approaches and thanks him for agreeing to accompany them to the nearest village. Haruka is sure he never agreed to this, but faced with her insistence, he ends up giving in. Shortly after, everyone has their things packed, ready to leave the forest. Haruka reminds them that they don't know what they might encounter out there, so everyone should stay alert. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, one of the boys from the class is desperately running for his life. He makes the mistake of looking back and trips over a rock, ending up cornered. With nowhere to run, he is strangled to death by his pursuer. Haruka's top priority now is to keep the girls safe, as the delinquents will surely come after them. To achieve this, he needs to get them out of the forest as soon as possible. A little further ahead, he crosses paths with a gigantic orc and sees the perfect opportunity to teach the girls how to defend themselves properly. He warns them to stand aside and pay attention to how he will handle the situation. With an air of confidence, Haruka charges at the orc with his stick. The monster raises its club with the intent to smash it into the ground, but when it looks down, it realizes that Haruka has simply vanished. He is hiding behind a tree, and given the orc's slowness, it would be impossible for him to be hit. However, if Haruka wants to fight back, he will need to come up with a plan. He recalls the nerd saying that physical attacks are ineffective against orcs, so the safest option to defeat them is to use magic. He opens the status window to check if he has any magic available and sees that he has mastery over all elements, thanks to his special ability. But before he can cast any spell, the orc finds him and uses its club to destroy the tree where Haruka was hiding. With no other choice, he dodges the blows until, tired of evading, he suddenly appears behind the orc and knocks it to the ground with a single blow from his stick. The orc falls dead. Haruka is surprised. He didn't expect a physical hit to work so well. The girls, on the other hand, are frustrated because they didn't learn anything by watching the orc be defeated so quickly. Haruka apologizes, promising to use magic next time so they can really see how it's done. The next time he spots an orc, which is simply wandering around, Haruka prepares a fire spell in his hand and casually throws it at the monster's face. The orc collapses and doesn't get up again. The girls are even more annoyed, thinking they will never learn to defend themselves if he keeps killing everything in the blink of an eye. Later that night, the group enjoys orc meat and has a barbecue. While Adriana relaxes and enjoys the moment, Haruka keeps busy setting up traps to ensure they aren't attacked during the night. His tent, by the way, has a skill that prevents them from being detected by enemies. With that, he believes they are well protected. Still, he decides to plan the route they will take in the morning. Activating his maximum skill, he begins to examine the path ahead when suddenly his sharp perception alerts him to the presence of someone nearby. He goes to investigate and soon distinguishes 4 male figures emerging from the darkness. At first, he tenses up, thinking they might be the delinquents. But as the men get closer, Haruka realizes they are just the Gem brothers, and he feels an immediate relief since he won't have to fight them. Meanwhile, the WCK class was looking for Haruka and spotted him talking to the 4 guys from a distance. Even without apparent hostility, Haruka still wonders what the Gem brothers are doing there. He imagines they might be after the girls, but the guys vehemently deny this and say they actually came looking for him. Haruka decides to believe their story, although he doesn't understand why they were avoiding the girls. The Gem brothers then explain that they don't trust them and reveal a concerning piece of information. There is an ability even worse than charm and puppeteer that the delinquents wanted to use. Haruka remembers reading something about a hijack ability, and that's exactly what the Gem brothers are talking about. The delinquents spoke openly about everything they intended to do with their mind control abilities, but never mentioned anything about hijack. This can only mean that they don't have this ability. If neither the delinquents nor the nerds possessed it, then one of the girls probably has this ability and is keeping it a secret. With a mischievous smile, Haruka decides to tease the Gem brothers by hinting that he might be the one with the hijack ability, but the guys don't seem fazed by the provocation at all. They appear relieved, knowing that Haruka is so reserved that he would never go around looking for people to steal their abilities. Haruka then admits that he doesn't possess the hijack ability, although he has a subjugate ability that can turn people into his servants. He just prefers not to use it. The Gem brothers were there merely to warn him about the dangers of hijack, and before they head back into the forest to watch the suspicious delinquents, they ask Haruka to apologize to the class representative and the other girls on their behalf for having disappeared without warning. The next morning, everyone wakes up, and the girls seem much more cheerful than usual. Haruka, on the other hand, needs to distance himself because all this energy is draining his own. As he moves away, the class representative approaches with a nervous look, saying she has something important to confess. Hesitating, she reveals that she is the one who possesses the hijack ability. But Haruka has known this for a long time. After all, he has an appraisal ability. The representative is taken aback to discover that he was already aware, since only the nerds knew about her secret. She asks why he never said anything and why he continued to help her even knowing. For Haruka, it simply wasn't a big deal. She questions whether he isn't afraid. After all, hijack is an ability that allows someone to steal another person's abilities by killing them. Anyone would be terrified of that. But once again, Haruka sees no reason for concern. The nerds probably weren't worried either, since they knew about the ability, and although they had sealed the delinquent's charm and puppeteer abilities, they left the representative with hijack. This can only mean that, at the very least, they trust her not to abuse that power. Haruka feels the same way, as he is sure she would never kill anyone. Touched by Haruka's trust, the representative lets a few tears escape. He finds it funny, considering she has been crying quite a bit in recent days, but she quickly blames him for being the reason behind so many tears. The group continues through the forest, and after traveling a good distance, Haruka announces that everyone can take a break. He pulls out a juice box and offers to sell it to the girls, but since none of them have any money, one girl suggests paying in another way in exchange for the juice. The class representative quickly intervenes, leaving the girl without the juice. After this brief pause, they resume their journey. They are ahead of schedule, but it will still be dark before they reach the village, which means another night camping. It is then that Haruka spots a nearby river and sees the perfect chance to try something out. He asks the representative to take care of the other girls while he goes to explore. She offers to accompany him, but Haruka wants to do this alone, so he sets off before she can follow him. Running through the forest, he activates his magic boost ability to strengthen his body and casts a gravity spell to become lighter. With this combination, he moves faster than ever and believes that with enough force, he might even be able to fly. He decides to test the theory and jumps high into the sky. At first, it seems to be working, but he soon starts to fall, and before he realizes it, he crashes into the forest floor. He narrowly avoids dying from the fall, so he decides not to try that again and heads back to camp. When the representative sees him all bruised, she panics and asks what happened. Haruka explains that he launched himself high up, but gravity insisted on bringing him back down, and he almost died in the fall. She starts to scold him, calling him reckless, but to try to lighten the mood, Haruka mentions that at least he spotted some fruits from up there and offers to make juice for her. The representative declines, but the juice girl appears once again, insisting on getting the drink. The next day, they continue their journey, and everything seems calm, except for one girl who got lost and the orcs that crossed their path. Despite these obstacles, the group finally manages to exit the forest. The girls are ecstatic to be free from that place, knowing that the village is not far away. But Haruka remains on alert, as they feel exposed in the open. The hills block his view, preventing him from seeing the exact location of the village. He then opens his status window to check if there is any ability that could help, and to his surprise, he discovers a new skill, Walk on Air. It seems he acquired it after his disastrous attempt to fly the day before. He decides to test it, and to his surprise, he begins to walk on air. The representative notices that Haruka has disappeared and starts looking for him until she spots his figure floating in the air. Haruka looks down with a smile and says he just wants to explore a bit to ensure everything is safe. The path ahead seems secure. He observes from a distance, and at first glance, everything appears peaceful, but he soon notices a group of villagers being attacked by wolves. He descends and tells the class representative that he didn't see much beyond a few people being attacked. The representative believes they need to help them, but just because they are being attacked by monsters doesn't mean they are good people. All the girls think they should run to save the villagers, but at this distance, none of them would make it in time, even if they ran. And what if the people turn out to be bandits or something similar? Haruka doesn't want to take risks that could put the group in danger. Therefore, he suggests that they just ignore the situation and keep moving forward. He starts to walk away, but the representative grabs his arm and pleads for him to reconsider. She says that if the people are bandits and try to attack them, she will fight them, but if they are good people, she wants to save them. Haruka already knew the class representative would be determined to help others, even if it put her in danger, but given the current situation, the girls are still terrible at combat and couldn't do much to help, even if they wanted to. So, Haruka decides he will handle the situation on his own. The people are too far away for him to run over there, and even if he tried to use the weight magic from yesterday, he probably still wouldn't be able to make it. So, he decides to try something new. He activates Magic Boost and the weight magic on himself, as if he wants to put the finishing touch with a powerful wind spell to act as propulsion. The spell is so strong that it ends up enveloping the class representative, but Haruka doesn't notice, so he takes off toward the villagers, using the walk on air ability to stay suspended. As he flies, Haruka feels something gripping his cloak and turns around, shocked to see the class representative hanging onto him, terrified. She explains that she was sucked up by the wind spell and that they are now too high for her to let go. Thus, she ends up accompanying him on the adventure. When they approach the villagers, the representative asks Haruka to stop, but he never really thought about how to stop, so they end up landing in the middle of the battle between the villagers and the wolves. As a result, the representative faints, all the wolves are instantly eliminated, and the people are left in total disbelief. While the representative is still unconscious, the leader of the group thanks Haruka for saving them and introduces himself as Ofter, while his friend is named Gayak. If Haruka hadn't shown up, Ofter's entire group could have been exterminated, so he is truly grateful. Hera asks what they are doing there, and Ofter and Gayak explain that wolves have been attacking merchants on the plains, and the Adventurers Guild made a request to exterminate the wolves. They thought they could handle the situation at first, but they were soon overwhelmed. Their cart was destroyed, so they will have to carry everything back to the village by hand. And since there isn't much for Haruka to do until the rest of the girls arrive, he decides to share some roasted mushrooms he carries for emergencies. Gayak is surprised that Haruka is sharing something like that with them since they are stamina mushrooms, extremely rare, as they restore a person's stamina almost instantly. Soon, the rest of the girls from the class arrive, all excited to meet the group of elves and women from the night, and everyone gets along well. Ofter offers to guide them to the town he came from, and soon the group arrives in the town of Omu, thrilled to finally be back in civilization. Meanwhile, in the forest, the delinquents have leveled up significantly in the past few days, and now that they have accumulated a good amount of experience, they plan to go after the girls and take revenge. However, before doing that, they need to unlock their puppeteer and charm abilities, so they will go after the nerds first. This marks the end of episode 4. Subscribe so you don't miss the next part.